Welcome to Theorycraft, a live podcast where game designers and our players engage in conversation. We are the number one live game design specific podcast in our time slot in this server. It feels great to be here.
Server first.
I know, it's pretty incredible. I just got the report in. It's been a while. I guess Kevin's not going to be joining us today. Something came up, so it'll just be the three of us. And today will be like a Q&A focused day, sort of chewing through the backlog in game dev speak. Chris, how you been? I know that Kevin made a trip out to California and you two met up. How did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to be back doing this podcast. It's interesting how much I look forward to it, and I had a void of the last 2 weeks, just not talking doing it. So yeah, and Kevin, was it a couple weeks ago? He came into Orange County, and we met up with him and had ramen. So it was just fun, and we just swapped stories about Blizzard and talked about God, what did we talk about? Raider IO and all of that stuff, as one does,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good times. I think he was down for a week or so. Yeah, so he was posting pictures of his foods he ate in his Discord, and yeah, you can go see all the things he ate.
Yeah, maybe we can get some cross posting of his food inspo going on. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Has you two ever really obviously you work together, but in terms of just going out for ramen, that level of it, is that something this podcast helped bring together, or?
I think so. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, really, after I left Blizzard, Kevin watched my video on his channel, and I think that's kind of how we sort of reconnected. And then I came on his channel, or on his on his Twitch stream to chat to him, and then obviously after that we started this show together, and that's given us an opportunity to reconnect. I had lunch with Kevin now and then back after he left Blizzard several years ago, but it's been a while, right? Since I was able to meet him in real IRL, as they say.
That's fun.
I haven't talked to you either in a bit. It's usually not everybody knows this, but Luca and I talk almost every other day.
It's true.
And,
yeah,
especially during
the COVID for sure. It really kind of glued that together. Yeah, that Discord with you and your crew of misfits kind of became my real, I don't know, just cozy place over the pandemic, I want to say, remotely. And it was just a great place to constantly be having discussions about all the insane shit that was going on last year with other people wondering what was coming out of it and what was going to be next. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I've been busy. I imagine you've been busy too. But I took some little time off. I went out of the city. I live in Vancouver, and I went out of town for a couple days last weekend to a cabin that a friend of a friend has. Back in our grandparents' days when people went in on group land buys by lakes and built cabins by hand, they have one of those. And it was just so nice to get into nature and have no internet reception for a couple of days. It was, I don't know, but okay. So have you considered, I don't know where you've lived and exactly for how long, but I've spent 20 years of my life in probably various cities, and that's 20 years of my time on Earth that I've not been able to see the stars, for example. You just start realizing all these insanely basic human experiences that you just aren't getting every day in modern life. And I was amazed at how not bored I was with just listening to the water and getting to go for a swim first thing in the morning. And it was just truthfully, I didn't really want to come back, but here we are. It was good. I think a lot of it was probably just post-COVID emotional release too. But yes, I spent some time sunning on a rock, became a merman, just like my Pixar namesake. And and that was what I did. So yeah, I'll spend the rest of the summer chasing that dragon and trying to get back out to something like that. But in the meantime, games. That's what we do. Candace, what have you been up to?
Oh, a bunch of travel. A family member passed away, so I had to head down to Texas, see my family, and then it just happened to coincide with my sister's birthday, and I promised her since it was her 40th birthday, we'd do it up big. So I flew her out to Los Angeles, and we ate in the the largest skyscraper or whatever at a restaurant called 71 Above, and we beach bummed and all that stuff. So I've had zero time for video games, even though I did install. I don't even know. I installed Fallout 76 because one of my dear friends plays it, and she's really trying to sell me on it. But I'm gonna have to find time to play with her.
I wonder where that
Yeah,
eventually
I'm curious.
stabilized to.
Yeah, me too. I'd be curious. I should check that out too and see like where it's at. Because there's after the dust settled. Because they had a
Right,
rocky
right.
beginning, but
Yeah,
was
it's
I always
blowing
thought
my
that.
mind because she plays like 8 hours a night for months. So there's something for her to do.
Whoa.
I'm like too
Yeah.
nice to be like, why? Like, what is it
Yeah.
that you enjoy? Because like clearly she enjoys it. So there's something there.
Yeah, I went through that. It was like the most roastable thing on the market for a couple months there. What was it, like the backpack gate where they shipped people something that was made out of the cheapest looking nylon ever when they promised them this like rugged survivor sack, and they were just getting dogpiled on. I think that was probably like 2018. Because I remember cataloging the year of like which developer was getting pilloried one after another, and then there was the don't you have phones and a new age.
I mean, I didn't. That wasn't an attack on Fallout 76. I played it when it released and I enjoyed it. There has to be something with a tail on it that I don't see, that I didn't see
Totally.
when I played it, or that was introduced later. And some of the screenshots I see are freaking hilarious. Like it looks like they're all having a great time. Well done, Fallout 76.
Good. Still in there. Options are good. Yes, speaking of video games, and this kind of brings us into just some topical industry stuff. Continue to play Mass Effect. No one really cares about that. It will happen for 2 more years. But I downloaded, reinstalled. I haven't reactivated yet, but Final Fantasy XIV last week because I could just not sit on the fence. And actually, the chief complaint that I see a lot of people having with this game is their payment system and navigating that online portal, which I think is actually the only reason I haven't really dove back in so far, because it was not a one-click thing to turn my sub back on. But people are shifting over to that game in what seems like a really big way. I know that, we've been talking about it constantly in the server, but like, how closely have you two been watching this? I was tuning into like the whole Asmongold stream saga, just kind of glued to it. And it's just been insane to see all the momentum flipping over. I saw Esfon tweet that he's going to shift over to it. And it really seems like Mindshare is moving right now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think, MMO players sort of like move in herds. They all kind of like go from one game to another and all collectively. And it honestly kind of makes sense because you kind of want to keep your community and your friend group together, and they're all sort of interconnected. And so it does seem, now and then they move to different games. WoW to, at one point it's Warhammer, and then Age of Conan and the Star Wars MMO and whatnot. However, I do think it's sort of different in this case. I think there's issues with, there's things that players aren't feeling with the live game with WoW, or they're upset with the developer team or whatnot. And we're also in this sort of like influencer dominated space where we're not dominated, but they do have a big influence, right? Or a big kind of impact on the players' perceptions of games. Like we had a show where we talked about this very topic, right? So yeah, it's been interesting to see. And I do think this is kind of is an interesting turning point for WoW. I think they've had like little competitors, like all the games I mentioned, that come up, prop up and then fade away, or they chip away at it a little bit, but they've never really had kind of a main competitor they were neck and neck with. It does seem like Final Fantasy now is sort of that first kind of real contender, right? And I mean, Candace could probably speak more to that game and versus WoW, and if there's anything of substance really there, and what.
Have you heard of the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV with an expanded free trial, which you can play through the entirety of Realm Reborn and the award-winning Heavensward expansion, up to level 60 for free with no restrictions on playtime? I had to say it. I'm sorry. It's a meme that's been going
That is
around.
the first I've heard of that meme, amazingly.
Oh, I currently read it off of a sweatshirt. That's how pervasive the meme is.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think that Final Fantasy XIV is a fantastic game. I have been playing it since the beginning, kind of as my off MMO.
Mhm.
I'll play WoW with my static group of my best friends that I've been playing with for a long time, and then whenever I kind of finish with where I'm going with WoW, either finish clearing the heroic boss, or I get to that point where I'm only logging in for my raids for my friends, and then I need something to fill the time. Which I think that Final Fantasy XIV is a great MMO for that space because it doesn't require a lot of time investment and you can kind of just enjoy the game. And I'm not sure if it's a product of what the game is or if it's how I play it, as being my off, like my side piece MMO.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what's striking to me is what you said before about people being kind of like locusts to new MMOs. I don't disagree that gamers are very passionate about finding another MMO that will scratch the same itch that World of Warcraft does. That like maybe has like better like graphics or has newer systems or whatever. And
Mhm.
so anytime a new MMO comes out, it's like let's go everybody, and you pack up the caravan, and you play, but then it ends up not quite being what you wanted. And so
Mhm.
they inevitably come back to WoW. Or maybe even the game is what you wanted and it's like a fantastic fucking game. Like to me, honestly, ESO was that. I really enjoyed ESO. But then the problem is like, well, my friends didn't adopt it and I play MMOs to play with my friends, right? And so I didn't
Yeah.
have success finding new friends in ESO. And it's not like I would replace my, 8 years of history with my best friends who have, seen me go through college and marry and divorce and all this stuff. So it's just hard to main a new MMO whenever everyone's still playing. So what's striking about Final Fantasy 14 is that it's been in the space, right? Like Final Fantasy 14 1.0 shipped in like 2009, maybe something, or the beta's in 2009, and it relaunched a couple years later as an entirely different game for those who don't know. And it didn't have that kind of traction back then. I mean, some people picked their side and they were like, "Yep," and that's why like the community is what it is. And what I mean by that is like you can tell that a lot of the people that played Final Fantasy have also played WoW. Not that they're trashing it, but they're just like, I prefer Final Fantasy for like these reasons. Also, would you like some help? I'm kind of wholesome. Like I really enjoy the community there.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I'm rambling. But like long story short, what's interesting to me is that this MMO has existed. People aren't swarming in the way that a new MMO has launched. They're swarming because a newfound excitement has stirred the pot, and I'm still trying to figure out. I haven't watched the Asmongold video, but I want to because I still want to figure out like what ignited that passion. Like what is making people willing to try to make new friends or have a new touchstone game. You know?
I think it's just the perfect moment for something like that because the narrative around retail WoW, for at least since BFA, has just felt so fucking beleaguered to me. And I think it's seeing somebody else, in this case, Asmongold, who parasocially is like your buddy recommending a new game to you, for a lot of these people, being lit up about literally doing anything new is just this kind of event that I think a lot of people have been waiting for and have been maybe scared to kind of check it out. Like you said, this competitor has kind of existed in the space and it's been a lot of people's main game for a long time. I don't think it'll be for everybody, but it really just seems like it was right balanced on an edge, and it's just as things seemed to slow down enough and there was just enough weakness shown on WoW's side, this really kind of disruptive opportunities come through. Like I was trying to think about this in, like a market disruption kind of way. And this is because Chris and I listen to a ton of Scott Galloway podcasts and he talks about this shit all the time. So not to bring up like, the economics of the game industry in a discussion about Activision Blizzard, but I was just trying to figure out like what's the equation going on here? It's basically a space is termed really ripe for disruption if the sort of inflation adjusted cost of something seems to keep matching the innovation in the space. And so, he'll use an example like a 60-second Super Bowl ad that costs $6 million or a $200 cable bill, might not really make a whole lot of sense now. And you'd be like, wow, those spaces are ripe for it. And it's interesting because WoW's sub has stayed the same pretty much the whole time. In fact, it's arguably become even cheaper if you consider that you can pay for it with gold. And other costs of subs have sprung up out of nowhere. So, but I think the real cost, obviously of playing WoW past a certain point and as the player base ages, it's your time. And so it's really just, do you feel like you're getting the most value for your time in this system, and is the value you're getting there and the innovation behind that keeping pace with, the time burdens, which to me it feels like the retail experience has, even though it offers a lot of alternate pathways, it's felt to me like it requires more upkeep than it used to. Like you said that Final Fantasy XIV feels like or someone in the chat just mentioned it's a good low upkeep game. We just hit this kind of magical tipping point. And I personally don't know that all of this fire is going to stay lit under Final Fantasy XIV for, months and months. Like, who's to say? But I do think that, this is a pretty significant sea change. Like, WoW players have not had a thing to en masse sort of feel like they can flock to. And now that this movement's happened, like, it'll be interesting to see how it rings out for the next several months,
It's also really encouraging to see that it can kind of grow, even though it's been around for so long, like Candace said. Because I think the kind of narrative with games these days is it comes out, if it flops, it's dead, kill it, and move on, right? And they've had a kind of a longer shelf life, and they keep improving the game. The kind of goodwill it has with players has been pretty solid, at least, and improving. And so, it's really kind of encouraging to see, right?
What's interesting to me is like when I put on my bigwig hat, if I were the game director or if I were the, EVP or, if I was the guy with the cigar that owned Blizzard or whatever.
Sure. We will not name names, but yeah, someone with a cigar.
I feel like, I don't even think he smokes. Anyway, I feel like there's at least two different ways to look at this too. Like if you put that hat on and you are that person for Final Fantasy, right? And you say, holy shit, like let's just guess here and say like, wow, we just had 3 million players mass exodus, like, and this is like way exaggerated likely, but we just had like 3 million people come to start play our game. And let's like also just keep guessing and say like, we've doubled, who cares, we've increased our player base by 33% or something like that. Like it's significant, right? And you're like, damn, we're going to start making them big monies. There's like two different ways to approach that. One is like, sure hope they like the game and that they continue to play it, and that we retain them. And then there's the other way to look at it, which is like the opportunist in you says, shit, how can we make our game more amenable to this huge crowd that has just joined, right? Like, what are their immediate pain points and why are they churning, and like really like dig into it for the opportunity. And I'm not even sure like what's the right answer there. I mean, the purist in me says like, no, if they don't like the game, then they're not going to be happy playing it. And whatever we do to change it to make them happy will be robbing from Peter to feed Paul, right? And it'll upset our existing player base. But like, would it upset them enough to make them leave? Or, there's this kind of like evil corporation way of looking at it. But also you can consider yourself a humanitarian because you're trying to provide a home, for these new MMO players on your game.
Sure.
It's like, I want you to feel welcome. I also want your dollars, but I also like, is there something that we can give up to feed these players? And it'll be really interesting to see how that shakes out, I think, with the development team. Like, do they start becoming more accessible? Do they reduce their GCD, even though that would, really piss off console players for Final Fantasy XIV? Like, in what ways will the game take a different shape, if at all, in the next couple of months to a year to try to retain the players that have joined from WoW?
My guess is more likely we would see some dramatic action on the side of the Blizzard development team in response, since they would sort of be on the back foot in such a scenario. And, it would be like I don't know what Final Fantasy's reaction speed is in terms of implementing new features, but for them to shift their design philosophy massively this deep in when it's kind of working for them, I think we'd sooner see Blizzard pull, whatever the sort of like game design / cosmetic incentive of the equivalent of, like resurrecting Illidan again, like I think for a long time people were joking about just new Lich King, in case of emergency break glass. Like I think it pretty much, if this is a substantial move and it's a sustained move, it'll be really exciting to see the WoW dev team have to match what this other game is sort of offering, or just sort of accept that these folks are gone and they're maybe not coming back. But it is neat to see that decision potentially forced, because there is real competition.
It is a good question of, like, what will Blizzard do in this situation? And it's interesting because, there's that like leak or whatever, and the leak was just like, oh my God, everybody's like pulling their hair out at Blizzard, and, they're trying to rack their brain on like how to solve this problem, and people morale is yada, yada, yada. And with all these like leaks or quote unquote leaks of like the story and all these things that are happening. And, I tweeted out like, this is fake as fuck, right? And it is fake. It's totally, a fanfic.
Mhm.
But there is some truth in it that there are some challenges within the studio, and they are probably thinking about what to do about, what to do, if anything, about this Final Fantasy situation, or with Asmongold, or the players' discontent with the game. Obviously there is going to be some of that, but yeah, that quote unquote leak is fake, and it's really annoying, because when I was working at Blizzard and Candace was and whatnot on the team, it's just really annoying to see fake leaks come out, because you can't really do anything about it, right? And it's a policy. I highly doubt they would respond and say it's not real, because you don't want to be on defensive like that, and it's probably maybe better to ignore it. But that's kind of why I replied, because obviously I don't work there anymore, and I know how annoying it is, and so I'm just like, yeah, this thing's fake.
Well,
but yeah,
do you have any more to say on that, like Blizzard versus Square in this, or just on the topic of this competition?
Well, maybe let's just have like, we should probably wrap up this, just get to the Q&A. But I think it's maybe quickly, just real quick, each of you kind of say, like, if you're working at Blizzard, what would you do? What do you think they're going to do, I guess, is a better question. Maybe Candace could start. What do you think they're going to do?
What do I think they're going to do, or what would I do? Because I don't think that those are the same.
They're not. Yeah, probably not. What do you think they're going to do, I guess? How about that?
I think, well, I mean, okay, so putting back on my Blizzard hat, a bunch of people just left my game. People are upset. Okay, what do? Okay, I tried to identify what the actual root cause of the issue is. And on the surface, it sounds like people are leaving the game because they're not feeling heard, and they were unhappy with some Shadowlands features that didn't pan out. So, like, first of all, like, do like a huge. Okay, no, now I'm skewing this into what I would do more. So I would do like a huge.
Go ahead, if you want
postmortem.
to say what you would want to do, that's fine.
No, I'm still gonna keep assuming that I'm Candace Costas or whatever. So like, post-mortem of like all of Shadowlands. How did it get here? Why is it here? What did we intend? And how did it end up? And how do we think like that happened? I guess. And then once that is identified, make a plan to not make those either mistakes or just say, those circumstances, COVID, whatever, they won't affect us next time, but here's how we will in the future, do better by the players. And then I would take that honest assessment, and I honestly think probably Ian might too. I shouldn't speak like it's just Ian, like he's the only owner of the game, but like the WoW team rather would say, like, issue a statement like, hey, Shadowlands didn't pan out the way we wanted to. In a lot of ways it did, and we think it was a really successful game. But there were things that, that fell short, and here's our plan to correct it for the future. And I would I think WoW will hold that until they have something super spicy and delicious to reveal. So like, here's how we're going to prove it, because that's how Blizzard apologizes. They apologize by like, one, we want to make it right, and two, here's how we're making it right. Even if that means that it delays the apology or the explanation or whatever. So it probably won't be immediate. It's going to take a lot of research, and it's going to take a lot of figuring out what to do about it. But then come back with here's a teaser for the next expansion, or here's like what we thought we wanted to do with Sylvanas. We hear that you didn't like the narrative or whatever, and here's what we're going to do in the future. Okay, you didn't like Covenants. It was a risk that we took. We realized that we failed. Like blah 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 blah. Here's all the reasons we think it failed, and then like just keep hitting people nonstop with content updates and things that will hype them up and kind of like ask for forgiveness in the way
Really?
of new content. Yeah.
So you think you would be really open and vulnerable and talk about, the challenges and talk about real things that you would change?
Yeah, I do think actually I do think they do that right now. From what I've seen, they'll have blue posts that are very long that talk about like stuff. Usually it's on the beta channels, but I remember I was actually just reading today, rereading a post that I guess has been deleted now, but was on Wowhead about like not giving or about the covenants. And it kind of talks about like, here was our intent with covenants, right? Our intent with covenants was that you wouldn't just play a paladin, you would say, I'm a Venthyr paladin or I'm a Kyrian paladin. And that's like a little bit of explaining to your audience like why we did what we did. But I feel like there could have been more of like, and here's why we chose for them to be talents, and here's how we thought we would introduce meaningful choice to you, and then like had it done like the reconciliation part of things, not like an apology, but like I call it reconciliation because it kind of like meets in the middle where you say like, and it didn't pan out because of this, like it wasn't a meaningful choice because of this, or whatever they identified was the problem with covenants that led to the changes that they're making, and then hit them with the changes. But instead it was like, here's the covenants, here's how they're changing, here's why they used to be what they were, thanks and keep playing WoW.
Hmm. Yeah. See, so my view is, so what do I think they're going to, or what would I do? I don't know if I would say like an apology or anything like that. But what I would do is kind of really work on engaging with players more, have open dialogues. How about this could be a nice format, like a Discord stage or something like that, where they bring people up and talk to them directly, and I think they got to do a lot of more work with that. And if you think about like kind of the community team, I used to know all of the community managers by name, and they were very active in the community. I can't tell you who they are right now. I know Josh Allen's still there, Laura, but he's kind of more high level now, and I don't know. I just feel like all of that is sort of decayed over time and really needs a modern sort of reinvigoration. Like if you look at even like the startup game Palia, they have a Discord where they engage with players. They do fan art, like Twitch sessions with them, and that's where we're at today, right? Like they're so old world. I feel like the WoW team, So that's kind of what I would do. What are they actually getting to do? Realistically, probably not much, if anything. It's like they're gonna keep doing kind of what they're doing. If anything, they may turtle up with the feedback and be like, "Our players are so toxic. I don't know how to deal with this." And and maybe they may be like emboldened to make sure that the features and things they're working on or hit the mark more. That's probably what I would expect.
I mean, we know that they are capable of figuring out the things that people didn't like about given expansions. Like every time Ian comes out and speaks, he'll open with, discussing systems in BFA that they had to retire or move on from too quickly. And, he's speaking to you as if just like, oh, we knew Azerite was going to be problematic all along. Like we bailed out on that. They seem to post mortem really well, but I think what people would really need to see to have their hearts and minds changed on this is something deeper than that, because I think it's been a couple of expansions almost where the tone has felt sort of apologetic. And I think that what they will do, again, is probably not much besides, just like a presser. AMA's continued exposure, hopefully 9.2 hits it really big. I don't suspect that a ton of stuff will change. I think the most dramatic thing that they could continue changing would be like a misanalysis of the threat, like not shifting the design philosophy, but trying to match them on some sort of other battlefield, such as, the meme about Heavensward being free up to 60, like trying to open the gates a little wider for people to just be able to dip in and dip out, because if more of the revenue is coming from microtransactions than ever, then perhaps lowering the barrier of people coming back to replay, could be done a little bit more, like accepting that folks are going to leave for a little bit. I don't want to see anything dramatic. What I think what I would do, and this is me at my most assertive, self-actualized, brilliant self, I think there really needs to be some internal reflection on how this sort of exodus could have happened. I do think that it's not accidental, and I don't think it's entirely circumstantial. I think pinning it on COVID and those sorts of difficulties is kind of a non-starter when every developer has been going through it. And I really do think like you need to look at why some of the best intentions seem to continue to generate the same sort of discourse in the player base. And I think that the idea that they are not all wrong and toxic needs to be like seriously entertained and questioned. I think in their hearts, everybody's rooting for WoW to win. Like, people fucking love it. I love the game. I would prefer to never ever have that giant percentage of my brain that's reserved to all the fucking lore and item tables and everything go away. Like, I want it to be great. So I think people are always going to maybe be able to forgive them. But I think it just is taking more and more dramatic gestures to bring people back over it in a world where they have other things they can do with their time, you know? They do have to step up, like you said. You know, some things just aren't maybe meeting modern bar anymore, right? Like communication. Yep. I think that's a really good one. Okay, this is like entirely its own show, and I don't want to stir the pot. So this show is supposed to be about, you know, questions and answers. We get tons of stuff, and they ask us anything and topic suggestions, and we rarely get to most of it. So first off, if you want to come up, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll just open the floor now. But what? Okay, good job. But what we did is Chris went through and selected just a couple of choice ones or ones that appealed to him just to kick things off. The first one from Mo talking about the day-to-day design process I thought was pretty interesting, and I would really love to hear the two of you hold court on how you tend to find inspiration and, I don't know, kind of curate your own growth as designers. This is sort of, I mean, I know how I do it from my side, but I deeply admire both of you in the way that you think, and I'm sort of wondering where that comes from on the day-to-day. Like, if you can even point to anything. Candace, want to start off?
It depends on my task at hand, but since I did encounter design for so long, I think I have a really, really dumb little mnemonic device for helping spur the creative process. I assume what you're asking is like, how do you still design? How do you have a creative job and do a lot of it? I guess.
I think it's just kind of like how do you get your inspiration? How do you get your ideas? Where do they come from?
And if you have a process, maybe it's the sorts of questions you ask. Like, I even noticed you doing it, piecing apart, you know, a conversation in the Discord earlier today. I think maybe the process in this case is like a lot of your identifying the problem.
Yeah. So in a space where I'm making encounters for a 10-year-old game, you're not really like, you're not going to like innovate on a game like that in one encounter. And if you do, you probably shouldn't be. Like, there should probably be like a huge innovation that is game wide and not just like one encounter in one place. And so I found like this formula for making like a lot of maybe really good content, but at the very least okay content, which is it's like the saying when you're getting ready for a wedding in the United States or whatever, which is you start with something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. And so like the old thing is like you're borrowing from all of the systems of your game, right? All the rules, like mana is finite and tanks are a thing and healers are a thing. And encounters specifically, I used to start with like, I start my inspiration with like a boss that I like that I feel like hasn't been either emulated in a while, like a mechanic I haven't seen. So something old, I'll be like Grobulus. And like, here's the relationship that players have with Grobulus. So they kite him in a circle and there's just one ability and like all this stuff. And then something new is going to be like the wrench that I throw in it. So now that I know that like the paradigm of Grobulus is that people are kiting like in a circle or whatever, and there's this ever growing area denial that lasts for the entire encounter or whatever. I'm like, how do I make that new? And like, let's say, I mean, this is technically borrowed, but like, let's say that you can now like DPS a monster that shrinks the area denial. So you're cranking this whole area denial thing up to like 1,000,000, but you've introduced this new mechanic of like, now you can actually regulate some more of the space. You give the player a little bit more control over the battlefield. And then something borrowed, that's where I tap into all the rest of the video games that I've been playing in my life. Like, so what's hot right now? Like Valheim's hot, or fucking I don't know, when like Final Fantasy remake was hot or something like that. I'd be like, what do I think was really cool about that? And like, I guess from Valheim, one of the things that had been really cool is like you could prepare for a fight somehow. Like if I knew I was fighting Motor or something, I would like build a platform to fight Motor because Motor was like spawned in a bad place or something. And like you can't like build stuff in WoW, but maybe there's an analogy there where you can prepare the battlefield ahead of time, maybe with like ad placement. So like now we're talking about starting a new phase, kind of like in Kael'thas, where he has his advisors or whatever, and wherever you kill them, they'll be resurrected later. So like space matters. So I think of like the thing from the game that I'm borrowing from. If it was Valheim, it'd be that, or if it was like Final Fantasy remake, it'd be like you're gonna have reinforcements that are coming. Because I really like their summon mechanic. Where like you can't summon immediately, but you can summon once the shit hits the fan. And I'd like that's my borrowed. Old, new, borrowed. And then blue is kind of dumb. Blue is just something completely out of the blue. Like, it could be a mechanic, it could be a theme, it could be, okay, now it's Grobulus, except Grobulus is a butler. And that's sort of how, what's his name from, the raid? Oh, God. The guy with the cakes? He was a cake and a butler in the middle of
Trilliax, yeah.
That, like, that's
From
the kind of
Night
out
Owl.
of the blue thing. And what's important about out of the blue is not that it's going to make for a really satisfying encounter, but it's going to give it personality, or it's going to give it like that je ne sais quoi or whatever. So I think League of Legends characters do that really well too, where they're like, okay, this is a mid-range DPS, and she's going to be like a spell power, whatever. But also she uses a big fucking pair of scissors, and that's kind of what's iconic about her. So you can have like a marquee mechanic that players care about in an encounter, but if you have like that marquee thing about their personality, it just like adds maybe half a dimension to the monster that didn't exist. And so anyway, so the point is if I'm using that formula consistently as I'm making content, it's kind of forcing me to innovate on both WoW and like to keep the genre fresh. And so that's sort of a foolproof way. At the very least, you're going to make like okay content, but you might actually make something real special. And now I'll pass it to Chris.
You must have answered this question before, because that was a really well thought out like model. I don't know.
I tell that
that
to
was
junior
insane.
designers all the time.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a really good one. The way that honestly, a lot of the way I structure, the way I implement things and build systems is really similar to Candace's, honestly. But the way I kind of get my inspiration, you've been watching Mad Men recently, Luca, and it's like one of my favorite shows because it's a drama about creative people, which you don't really see on TV. Usually TV is about doctors or, drug people and the police and all these sort of things, right? Like, but it's actually a show about creative people trying to solve problems, and it's a lot of similar things in the game industry, actually. And one way that they kind of find inspiration is like they often like Don and Peggy, etc., go to the theater just to watch a movie to like quote unquote get the cobwebs out, right? And so that's kind of how I get a lot of my inspiration and ideas is through other creators, through watching movies, playing games, obviously, reading books, listening to other people talk, and even through other mediums, a lot of people I think in the industry also get inspiration from anime and fanfics or whatever. It's just you gotta be out there consuming a lot of creative work and art too to help you get think about different ideas and different dimensions of stuff. So I think that's my answer.
Yeah, I find that consuming lots to stay influenced is nice, but it's always tough to sort of know where you are in the right balance between consuming and producing. Like you don't want it to be derivative, so putting your own twist on things. I like that Candace has a formula for doing so because it kind of keeps it at the worst feeling like remix culture, and at best it's like just divinely inspired when you kind of bring things together in a new way and it's like peanut butter and chocolate suddenly. You're like, who would have fucking thought to put those together? I mean, everybody would have, but there are some other crazy combinations out there. Watermelon and feta, shit like that. Okay, is Stoop still up here? Do I have to tab over?
He came down for a second. I think bring him back up. There he is.
Okay, cool.
You
Welcome to the stage.
Right?
Yeah, I saw you up here before, and I just wanted to throw the question to you.
I left because I felt awkward. I'm just sitting over here with the Peepo picture, when you guys are talking. I just felt
I know we need to shut up. We just keep going.
no, it's totally fine. So yeah, I actually had a question about the WoW token. I'm working on a video, and there's a lot of talk, especially in the MMO genre, about cash shop features, quality of life features. In other games, it's more acceptable to have cash shop skins like Counter-Strike or League because it's not so much about the achievement, and then having like mounts or cosmetics kind of take away from the cosmetics you earn in an MMO because that's kind of how you flex your accomplishments. And I know with like New World, for example, they kind of got dumpstered on for just kind of releasing a bit too early that they're going to have these quality of life features. You have Lost Ark is a game from the East that's coming over to the West, and they have to put out these statements that they're going to alter their approach because Western players don't like these types of features in MMOs. And then you have like cosmetics also in Final Fantasy, where you can buy like a fucking whale. It's like $45 and all your homies can ride in it. And the community's more accepting of that because they really love their game and they want to support it. It's a different community than WoW, I would say. But in some games, you literally can buy actual player power, right? Like you can outright buy gear, achievements that will get you gear. And I've noticed from a lot of WoW players, they're always so dismissive of these other games because they have, cash shop features. They don't, I won't touch that game because it has that. But in WoW, with the WoW token, you literally can buy gold from the store. You just exchange it for gold and you can buy anything that you want in the game, right? Like if you go to Trade Chat today compared to what it was like 10 years ago, you would see players advertising, hey, I'm selling this profession-based item. I'm selling these mats that I farmed. Now you can't even find that. It's only, I was doing a test for 10 minutes. It's only players selling carries and boosts and raid run throughs for gold. And the price of these things are outrageous, right? Like if you're compared to the WoW token, it's like $600 for a carry through the new heroic raid, for example.
Oh my God.
So I was just kind of curious, what your guys' thoughts are on the WoW token. I know monetizing an MMO is kind of difficult, and you guys did a topic on that. I thought that was interesting. Maybe you could elaborate on that and just give me your thoughts about monetization in MMOs and the WoW token.
Okay, I'll start. I feel like the WoW token, similar to the D3 auction house, was an attempt to reduce the amount of players who get hacked in the game. Because people are going to want to buy gold. This is like an inescapable reality in your game. And the question is like, what do you do about it? And it's like a cursed problem. If you've ever heard this talk, there's a dude at Riot who gave a talk called like Cursed Problems on the GDC Vault. I think it's on YouTube too if you want to watch it. But like, there's 4 different approaches. There's like gates and barriers. Gates is like a hard block. Like, nope, nobody can trade gold anymore. And like barriers are like, you can only trade up to 50,000 gold a day. And there's like s'mores and carrots as the other approaches that he took. One is like s'mores is just like you lean into it, you want some more of it. So you're like, oh, you want to fucking trade gold? All right, well we'll let you do it. We'll do it safe, which is exactly like what the D3 auction house is in the WoW token. Like, you want to trade gold? Fine, we'll support it, and we won't hack you because we're Blizzard because we own everything anyways, right? And then the carrots would be like. Carrot would be like trying to not make people trade gold, or like maybe you want gold a lot or something like that. Carrot would be like you're trying to entice the player to do something that the right behavior, which I don't know what the right behavior would be here. I'm not that good at game design. So anyways, they took the s'mores approach where they just like bathed themselves in the fire. And it also has the side effect of being like a value-added service that I think that because they make money off of it, so it ends up being a win-win. If you're looking at it with that hat that I was talking about earlier, like, well, the players are no longer getting hacked, and also we're making a pretty penny. Everybody's happy or whatever. And so I guess that's not really like a solve for the problem. That's sort of like my mindset when it comes to it. But microtransactions are like very, very different. They're still the same in as much as like you want to serve the player and you also want to make money. It's very different for free-to-play games because they need to pay like people and they can't guarantee an income. So like there is that like distinction where like if you're playing a game that you're already paying $15 a month or whatever to play and then they're monetizing on top of it, you have to take a very different approach with that kind of monetization than you do a free-to-play game. Just because anything that you do as WoW is going to be seen as greedy. Like there's nothing you can do to make it not seem greedy, especially whenever there are free-to-play games on the market. So you have to like justify the cost. And there's a couple ways psychologically to do that are turbo fucked up, which is like anchoring the cost, right? So, so let's say you wanted to sell your car for like 50 grand or something, but you know it's not worth 50 grand. But if you could get everybody in the city to list their cars for 55 grand, then you could anchor the price of like a used car and then sell yours for 50 grand pretty easy. And like that's not a great example, but it's not a WoW specific example. But you see a lot of that price anchoring around. And with a free to play game, you have to be really careful with that anchoring, because what you're also anchoring often, and this was I think what was so contentious about New World, is the anchor put like a price tag on people's time, like because they're selling time, right? And so at some point, if you're selling like it's 10 hours worth of gameplay for 25 cents, then you're telling players that their 10 hours is worth 25 cents and you're cheapening the experience for
Totally,
everyone.
yeah. This is Asmongold's rants on the boost, even though he was, hardcore against it being included. He was like, you'd have to be a freaking fool not to do it. You're saving yourself 200 hours for $60. Of course I'm going to do it. If it's in there, I'm going to do it. I just wish it weren't there in the first place. I bet you a lot of people feel that way about the WoW token overall. It's just like, well, a bridge has been crossed now and we can't go back. But in suddenly doing it, you are opening up, a world of direct comparisons between real life money and various services in game, and like sanctioned ones too. And I don't know. I don't know if you asked like what do we think should be done about it, or if you were just asking about opinions. I think if you want to sort of reduce your story about sitting in trade chat for 10 minutes and nothing professions related coming up, the state of professions, I'm not even sure what it is, aside, strikes me as just really fucking sad. And I think if you wanted to try to shift the culture away from nothing but spamming, besides banning people, you would have to try to change the conversation or tone of your game in a way that like integrity starts to become more valuable. Because like when we talked about this in our episode, I think as soon as money enters play, integrity is sort of just like naturally devalued. And it's fine if that's how players want to think. Maybe the majority just doesn't care. But I think putting more sort of prestige type content in the game that relies on solo skill, like the mage tower and stuff like that, might be an option for shifting some of what's achievable back into the hands of individual players. If you want to try to eliminate boosts, you're still not really like cutting away the sort of philosophical problem that's there. But that seems to me like a way that you could use the lever of gameplay to try to steer some of this stuff away. Obviously, if I wanted to, I could have paid people to play my character through all the mage towers or something. But I think until certain things are normalized, there are just going to be bridges that players might not want to cross. I wouldn't have been comfortable just giving somebody else my account information just to get some mogs, right? So I was like, I'll do this myself. And then I ended up really enjoying it. And I think that is the sort of water that Blizzard maybe needs to lead people towards if they want to reduce the impact of all this purchasable gold. A little bit.
Part of the problem is just that, I think the kind of genesis of the token was just because there was this constant war with all of these gold seller companies. And it's just like at some point they're playing defensive and trying to get, shut them down and stuff. But it's like a never ending battle. You shut down one and 5 new spawn. And so kind of the idea with the token was, well, we'll just sell the gold ourselves and kind of control it. And because of that, we'll shut them all down because they can't compete with us. And that's kind of really what happened. A lot of the gold seller companies shut down because it no longer was economical for them to sell gold, right? And no one's going to trust the gold seller versus like Blizzard, right? And buying the token. So that's like one part of it. The other part is, gold has sort of become increasingly irrelevant in the game, right? Like the whole economy, it's massively inflated. And the things that you actually spend gold for are so ancillary. Like the original vision of gold was just that it was kind of really kind of hard to get. And that's why when you repair your gear, it was a meaningful cost. I remember remember stopping raiding because it was just too expensive. We didn't want to break our gear again on fighting this boss for another 10 attempts. So we had to take a week off to go grind some gold and come back, right? Like that is not like how gold is in the modern game very much anymore. So there's that. And really, you got to be careful when you add monetization for your currency in the game if it's really giving player power, because as we found with, say, like Candace said, the Diablo 3 auction house, if you could just easily buy the best gear in the game for equivalent of $2, you're gonna have a problem. The whole game will fall apart, right? And so, yeah, I think kind of players, it's more of a question for the community. I posted this story in live chat when we were talking about MMOs and the issue Blizzard's having with fans. And the thing is, fans are deciding what the future is and what the games are going to be. And so it's up to players to kind of vote with their wallets, vote with the games they play, and in terms of the economies and systems that they want to see. So
I'd also like to posit that the impact of that maybe some of that was by design as well. That like the importance of gold, now that you're going to lean into a hyperinflated economy where people we're like printing money all the time, you kind of have to reduce the impact that gold has, right? It has to be cosmetic items. It can't be best in slot stuff.
Yeah.
And you can kind of never go away. Like once you've made that decision, you never can. Which of course now there's all these implications with crafting now too, where it's like, well, what's the point of crafting if I can't get my best in slot? And
Yeah.
because we've married crafting to the trade economy, those are all just kind of cursed problems.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely I mean, all of it was good. I mean, just the Mage Tower as an example. I mean, that's just a great example of how you could kind of steer players away from doing these transactions. And I mean, that's just I think the big issue with the game is that there is no reason to really have professions in Shadowlands. They try to combat it with the legendaries, and they're really expensive right now. To craft one of your new Legos for the new patch, it's 500,000 to $1,000,000 gold.
Jesus.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
I had to pay
like
200K for my level 2
yeah,
legendary back in the day because I wear leather and my server is just boned for leather. It's
yeah.
good,
And
fantastic.
no one really crafts does professions anymore because you can just buy gold. And then when you can buy gold, then you're just looking at trade chat and you see these guys selling funneled groups where they'll funnel you all the gear for however much, and you just see it all day in trade chat. It's a weird dynamic, especially in an MMO and for WoW.
It's an especially
Yeah.
weird dynamic too, because if you're not opting into that kind of gameplay, if you're not opting into buying tokens or if you've used money in the way that it has traditionally been used, in the WoW Classic sense, where it's I need my money to sustain myself. Maybe every once in a while I'll buy myself something nice from the auction house, but I understand that it won't be a best in slot item or whatever. Then you can't keep up with that economy. Like when I bought that fucking legendary, that was half of the money that I've had that for the entirety of my WoW career. Like I have only ever made 500,000 gold in WoW in 15 years of playing it just normally. Um, and it crippled me. It actually hurt my feelings that I was like, man, 7.5 years of my life of gold is gone for this one legendary that I know I'm going to have to upgrade again
Yeah.
in a patch. And that was honestly one of the things that detracted me from opting into the legendary. I was like, you know what? I'm actually just going to be okay with this is the highest level legendary that I'm going to get, because 10 extra item levels is not worth the entirety of my efforts of farming gold in World of Warcraft, and I don't
Yeah.
want to buy any tokens.
And
Yeah.
that's hard psychologically to just be okay, I'll just not be good, So
It's much
or
easier
not
as
be
I get older,
best.
my dude.
Just,
I think it
yeah.
is, yeah.
All right,
Awesome.
great
Well, I
question, though,
appreciate you guys.
Stoops.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Nano, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I wanted to add on a little bit to what Stoops was saying with gold, coming from a WoW Classic point of view, right? Because that's where I'm from. Is it's the fact that the WoW token exists doesn't is not the actual problem, right? And this is just positing my opinion on it, is that player behavior with World of Warcraft is just significantly different these days, where it seems everything is kind of geared towards min-maxing, being the best you could possibly be, and falling short of your absolute best is unacceptable, especially from the community. Yeah, so that player behavior is just completely different, and it has it changes our relationship with gold, right? So even in classic, like at the end of next game, if somebody's spending basically gold cap 198,000 gold in classic for a single item, just basically to have it, right? And it was equivalent of like 5,000 US dollars, and that's purchased illicitly. So there's just like this evolution of players that I've seen in World of Warcraft that is all about being the absolute best and doing everything the absolute best, and it changes our relationship with gold. But I'm wondering, like from your perspectives, is how would you as game designers start to change the player behavior from being about the best, maximizing your DPS to something else? I don't know what it'd be, but yeah.
Ooh. This is probably controversial, but one of the things that I've identified, because I thought about this a lot actually, and like I think that's like I think every WoW developer thinks about this a lot. Like why is it I can make something that's fun or good in some way, but people will absolutely ignore it if it doesn't have the right reward, or like
Yeah.
why does it have to fall in the meta or else people won't do it? And there's no like easy answer to that, but what I like to do is think about the past, which is like if you think about WoW Classic, the hard part of raiding, like the end game, was just getting 40 people that could stay connected and move as a pack, right? Like cross healing was hard because there weren't mods to do it. There were mods, sorry. You had to install a mod to see other people's health frames in the raid, to see all 40 people's health. Otherwise, you were beholden to having like one healer per group, which was not always efficient because the healer could have to run or something like that. But it was like a very low information time where no one was monitoring your DPS to make sure that you're, within 10% of the top DPSer or something, right? And to some extent, the game didn't call for that. Like I was saying, like the hard part of Molten Core was getting people there. And I'm not like disparaging anybody who played WoW Classic. Like Ragnaros was a very hard fight. There were actual DPS checks, and there was like killing the suns in time, and there was surviving the damage output, and there was like I think there was even like an attack to dodge the Sons of Flame. Anyways, but it was a very different game that required less of the player. But then as the players started adapting to that, like now you can readily see everyone's health. Well, now you have to like do 50% more damage because there's so much more coverage of healing, and like the difficulty of the game just like rose sharply because people could see other people's freaking hit point bars, and that's like small change, but it had a huge ripple effect on the game. And then there's mechanics that require you to react instantly, or the whole raid dies, or when you make a mistake, the whole raid dies. And so like the challenge of the game keeps inflating, and so the players have to be that good too, right? Like everyone has to min max, or else not has to, sorry. They feel like they need to min max because the game keeps asking more and more of them as time goes on. But then the paradox there is that like you'll get bored though if the game doesn't ask more of you, because you're learning more about the game and you're learning more about your rotation, as expansions go on. And it could also be why they're always like changing up your rotation to like keep it fresh and to give you a new thing to master, because our little human brains love to learn things. Like that's why we play video games. And anyway, so controversially, I think that that if you were to be able to slow down the rate that you ask more of the players and kind of let players find the fun themselves. Like who was saying that like they didn't have anything to do in WoW in vanilla, and so people just like made shit up, like we're gonna do gnome races and we're gonna do like gambling and stuff like that, just sort of like allowed negative space for people to have fun. And that negative space in the competitive scene is like letting people play with their friends.
Yes.
And like difficulties do a good job of letting people opt into difficult stuff, but even there's this joke that like if you make an end boss raid mechanic on Mythic difficulty, it will be a dungeon mechanic within 1 to 2 expansions. Maybe like trying to throttle that a bit will help people let people enjoy the game more on their terms rather than your terms.
I have a bit of a reach here, and obviously there's no simple answer to something like this. How do you change players' incentives? How do you remotivate them to go after something else? I can only I mean, I can only really speak anecdotally, but I was thinking about this a little bit this weekend in my full spectrum human experience time around this lake. And I wondered why I was just so uninterested in like the dopamine loop of checking out my phone and scrolling through things and just paying attention to the internet overall. I felt like kind of clearer, less distracted. And I think the reason for that is just there's a lot of my regular life, but maybe modern life generally, that's kind of like undernourishing in a lot of ways. And we sort of don't really realize what we are missing in terms of intake sensorially and what our brains can kind of be doing for us. And so we go for the cheap hits. And I think that within a game design framework, the chase for gear and bigger numbers is kind of the cheap hit here. And if you're familiar with, the Rat Park experiment, this is basically a study several decades ago that sort of showed that rats will, hit the bar and end up just basically dosing themselves with cocaine-laced water until they die, unless they are put in the company of a whole bunch of other rats and they have a more integrated sort of social life. They're living a more ratly life, so to speak. And in that case, they will actually start to make intelligent choices, and they'll be able to see, that, well, intelligent, I'm talking about rats, but, they won't kill themselves on cocaine-laced water is what I'm saying. And I think that to get people to shift motivations away from something that's so addictive in that very straightforward progress way, that gamified way, you need to remind them of like holistically what else there is for them to do. And I'll keep bringing this back to, my little war mode anecdote in BFA and the bounty hunter system and the sort of like forced 5-person party socialization that going out and doing this little objective put me into. Because roaming around an open world PvP with a bunch of people, like I didn't want to roam with pure randos for one, so I played with my friends. But even if I had, it was a really hard thing to do if you were playing with pure randos and you couldn't coordinate it. You were basically stuck in this kind of Band of Brothers scenario where you and 4 other people are going to have to stick it out and get, 10 kills in a row. And I think that like by the time you'd achieved that, you might find out that the real, horde assassin is the friends we made along the way. And it's like a reminder of one of the really great parts, the magical parts about WoW. I think that system again was just genius because it steered players towards it in a way that, was not super overt. It didn't try to lure them in with, like an even bigger reward. The title's cool, but, I'm kind of way out over my skis here, but this is just something I've kind of been thinking about. I think that there are more enriching, better designed scenarios you could introduce that could skew players away from gear. I guess I want to be an optimist in this scenario. I feel like if it's actually better content and actually worth doing, there is hope for players to do it, not just for an item reward. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was just thinking about it from my perspective a little bit too, and thinking through. I think modern WoW maybe suffers from this more than classic because at least being a classic player, my guild will just log in and just run circles around Chatrath right now and just chat and TeamSpeak and just shoot the shit. And there's nothing else for us to do other than that because there's not that much content in TBC, at least compared to retail WoW. And so I wonder if there's something to the idea that the more that there is for your player to do to earn power, the more likely you get into a situation where you feel bad when you don't have it, or you shame other players for not having it as well. And it kind of fosters that mentality within the entire player base, where simplifying the player power aspects of the game and then giving them ulterior things to do, maybe player housing or something along those lines, that they can spend their own personal time and investment and like be proud of something. In the way that I play Stardew Valley, right? I don't earn player power in Stardew Valley, but I enjoy building a farm. Why is there an opportunity for WoW to make a shift, the modern WoW to make a shift back towards that, where player power is not something that you farm during the week, but something you earn in weekly events like raids and dungeons, and then moving towards more cosmetic stuff that you can farm on the side.
It's really interesting because I think this aligns with something that I think about a lot too, which is like one of the things about Shadowlands that I personally don't like but I think is still good game design. Is like you have a lot of avenues of progression, right? You have like your Torghast, and you have your legendary, and you have this whole like Maw progression, and then you have your Covenant progression, and you have your level progression at the initial, like the start of it, and then you have your item level progression. And there's probably more progressions that I'm not mentioning here. And all of those are deeply satisfying systems in their own way. And what Shadowlands does is they have made all of that, like they've tied all of that together in codependencies, right? Like, so your item level can't raise until your renown is up, and your renown can't raise until you do the Maw enough. And then, like, they're all interconnected, not such that you have to like do one and then the other, but you're bouncing back between all of these things, right? And they're all basically not optional. Like, if you want to progress, you must progress one to progress the next to progress more. And that's what kind of irks me about the Shadowlands paradigm, because it takes a lot of deeply satisfying systems and fun gameplay that I would have normally thought was fun. But now that I can see the finish line, and I can see how far away it is at a glance, like I understand how much time it's going to take to get Soul Ash and how it's gated every week and all this stuff, that like the game feels too big in that way, right? Where it feels like there's an overwhelming amount of stuff that I have to do to stay competitive, and that the game feels too big. But at the same time, if I'm not opting into that loop, when I'm not staring off into the 1,000-yard stare of the distance of the finish line, what else is there for me to do? Like, so in that way, the game feels extremely small, right? Because I don't have anything else that I can do that I feel like I want to do, like sitting in chat threads with my friends, or planning a fucking in-game wedding, or like, like there aren't enough systems for me to do that are optional that I feel like I have agency over. And so the game just feels too big and too small at the same time. And so I think that's kind of like what you're touching on here, is like, what can they do to make the game feel bigger, even though the game is fucking immense already? And I think the answer is like more optional content, that like the devs have to be okay with people not playing.
Chris, thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I have nothing really to add that you guys haven't said. I just want to like answer some more questions as well. So,
Okay.
Thanks,
Well,
guys. I'll pop out.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Nano.
Nano.
Red Dot, I think you're next.
Hello, yeah, I'm still here. I was wondering, do you think a currency-based economy is actually required for MMOs, or like an auction house? Like if WoW didn't have gold, so you couldn't buy boosts, you just had, let's say, professions, and you had to almost like barter or join a guild and have like a sort of like different people have different professions, so everything's provided, let's say, for the raid and whatnot, and that's has much less utility. So you can't just be like, hey, I'll give you 1,000 intellect pre-pots for this raid clear or something, like,
Right.
since we already have 1 million pre-pots because of the last dude, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like it would lose value very quickly versus, let's say, something like gold that has, so that's my question.
I see where you're going. I understand the spirit of what you're saying, but really, in any economy, there's going to be a currency, and if it's not like a gold currency, like built into the game, it will turn into something else. Like Stone of Jordan and Diablo is a good example of this. That just turn into the currency, right? So players will find some currency if it's like heavy leather or whatever it is, will turn into like the currency people trade everything for. It's like the common currency. So it's kind of unavoidable if you're going to have an economy with players trade things, sell things. There will be some currency, even if you don't try to put it into the game. I think there's other ways to accomplish to make professions a bigger part of the game than they currently are in an economy-based game, right? A big thing is scarcity. If you if there's only so much leather that can be gathered in X time or something like that, then the value of them go up, and the value of all those goods created by those crafters goes up, right? Like there's gonna be, there's so many ways to skin that cat, I think.
It's a really interesting thought experiment, though. I that like my mind is reeling over. Like, what if you just didn't? Like, what if you just say, like, okay, fuck it. Like, motes of fire are going to be the currency for a WoW Classic because everyone wants to try to kill Ragnaros, and you have to make like pats or like whatever. Like, why? I wonder why games haven't tried to do like a hard currency-less economy. And are there any games that have done that well? There's like the Diablo, like the Stones of Jordan is a good example. Though there was gold in that game, it just
Yeah.
didn't exist in a way that it didn't exist in the way that currency normally functions. It's really interesting to think about. I wonder. It makes me want to do like a hyper analysis of what good a currency does for a game, because I'm sure there's got to be something, right?
Yeah.
Besides versatility. But yeah, man, that question blows my mind because I don't even know. Like it would be cool to see if to play a game that did not have currency.
If you find any examples, or if anybody knows them, just leave them in chat. Maybe we can bring them up another time.
Yeah.
I would just have a small follow-up then. Do you think some sort of economy is required in an MMO? Or can you just have, like, let's say there wasn't professions and currency in WoW? You just kind of play the game.
I think
Like,
that
is that bad game design, or?
it's not bad game design. It's just the purpose of an MMO, or not the purpose, but like the thing that MMOs have that is a superpower is other people. And so whatever you can do to make meaningful interactions with other people is going to multiply against the strengths of an MMO. Otherwise, you just have like a massively single player game. I'm not saying that you have to have crafting and trading and currency for all those things. I'm just saying that crafting and trading crafted items is a thing that makes MMOs feel good. And so you'd have to find other surrogates for that. Otherwise, like it's almost not even worth the cost of making an MMO if you're not going to properly identify the strengths.
Word. Thanks, Red Dawn, for both of those.
Thank you.
If nobody else has any questions, do y'all want to wrap it up? We had kind of pulled another one, but I think we could probably get to it next week.
Yeah,
I guess we're good. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming back. The break was great, but we will see you all again next week. Hopefully, KJ will be back in the saddle. And of course, just keep leaving questions there. We'll probably do another show like this in the future.
Yeah, I really like this one.
Yeah, it was great to just dig into some of these that are stacking up. It felt like community spring cleaning,
Mm-hmm.
Anywho. All right.
Good night, everybody.
We'll
Thanks
see you
for
next
coming.
week. Chris.
Thanks for coming.
He's not
Yeah,
going to
say
Later,
it.
gamers.
He's
Later,
not gonna
gamers.
do it. All right.